This is edition 101 of Fresh Hope Today, a weekly broadcast of fresh hope for those who have a mental health diagnosis. Hi, my friend, and welcome to Fresh Hope Today. I'm your host, Brad Hoefs, founder of Fresh Hope Ministries, and we're sure glad that you're with us today. And we're here because we want to empower you to live a rich and full life in spite of having a mental health diagnosis. And I have a young lady with me here in the studio today that certainly is learning how to live that full and rich life. And we're really glad to have her here with us today. Her name is Stacy. Welcome, Stacy.
Thank you.
We're sure glad to have you today. You've had a recent breakthrough in your journey. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Because today we're going to talk about switching on the choosing to live switch inside of ourselves, right?
That's correct.
And you've heard me talk about that many, many, many times, right?
I have.
Well, first of all, maybe tell us just a little bit about your journey. It's been a little bumpy, little bit of a struggle to get to this point, right?
Yes, I was diagnosed in 2011, and I've been in and out of the hospital a lot.
A lot, huh? Yeah. How did the diagnosis happen? How did that come about?
One night I was suicidal, and I couldn't snap out of it. And one of the people that I was living with took me to the hospital. Okay. And that's where I was diagnosed.
Okay, so you spent a little time in the hospital and then they diagnosed you. What basically did they diagnose you with?
Bipolar, PTSD, DID.
So a number of things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was in 2011, correct? Mm-hmm. Tell me about how things started out. How did they go for you?
Well, I really struggled, especially at the beginning. Mm-hmm. I had suicidal thoughts all the time, and I struggled to cope with those.
Sure. What were the suicidal thoughts? Were they ideations of just wanting to be dead, or were you having thoughts of planning a way?
Most of the time it was ideation, and sometimes it was plans of how I would do it. Okay.
And so you really struggled with that after you got out of the hospital?
And I did for years.
Okay. Well, now, did the medicine at any time kick in and start helping regarding those? Did you have times where it was better and more difficult other times, or?
I didn't feel like the medicine really helped me. Okay. I took it religiously.
So you were compliant with it?
I was. Yeah. Because I desperately wanted to get better. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to do, I came to Fresh Hope every week. Sure. And I saw my therapist religiously, and I saw my psychiatrist religiously. Sure. And it just seemed like I couldn't get better.
Yeah. Now, you did have some times when it seemed as though you had some breakthrough and were feeling a little bit stronger emotionally, would you say?
Yeah, I did. Those times just didn't last very long. Right.
And in fact, you went through a prayer-type program and came back really hopeful, and that seemed to work, and then you had a setback, and that just kind of threw you backwards. Is that correct?
That's correct,
Yeah. So it's been a struggle.
It has been.
Recovery is not a linear line, they say.
Yeah.
And you certainly have experienced that, haven't you? Yeah. Well, now, take me to just recently, about a week or two ago. Mm-hmm. And something snapped for you. Something began to make sense. And in some respects, I've heard you say to me that how you really are thinking and maybe feeling is still there, but you're able to do something about it. And so tell me what happened.
Well, I decided that even though I have issues and even though I have problems, that I can live a happy, joyful, content life. And I can choose to live that life.
Exactly.
And I can choose to live.
Uh-huh.
And on the days that I'm suicidal, for example, I can choose to get out of bed and run errands and go to programs that help me,
In spite of yielding to those thoughts or yielding to just saying, well, I'm going to stay in bed then. I just feel awful.
Absolutely. And I really believe that God smiles down on me when I choose to push through those thoughts and those emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Recovery definitely is not for sissies, is it?
No.
It takes work to push through those things.
And you have to be a strong person.
Right. Well, you met with a pastor, one of your pastors at your church, a week or two ago, right? And he told you something that really kind of, it's almost like, the Bible says so-and-so plants and so-and-so waters, and so-and-so does this and so does that. Quite honestly, it just seems like we had planted a lot of seeds along the way for you, and then all of a sudden something took root for you. Mm-hmm. And can you tell us about that?
Well, there was a pastor at Christ Community that knew me before I got sick. And I think that's key. I think you need to have people in your life that knew you before mental health diagnosis took over. Right,
before there was this mental health challenge, because in some respects you're different because of it, right?
Yeah. And he said to me, he said, Stacy, this depressed person that we're seeing here is not the real you.
Oh, well, who would have thought to say that? Yeah. How did that make you feel at that point?
I thought, oh my gosh, I had allowed my mental health diagnoses to define me.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it was like, I have the option to not be a victim and to live a more fulfilling life, because this pastor talked about how he saw me minister to a young lady and comfort her and show compassion to her. And he said, Stacy, that is the real you.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that had to be quite an experience at that point.
Absolutely.
And suddenly this idea of choosing and to remember who you are and choosing to live made sense then, huh?
Yeah. And it took a week or two.
Uh-huh.
But something clicked. I had heard in Fresh Hope over and over and over again that we can choose to live. And I thought, yeah, right.
Yeah, in fact, almost every one of our tenets say, therefore I choose to,
Mm-hmm. And I felt like my pain was so much greater than anything anyone could understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't believe that I could choose to live. And all of a sudden, when that pastor talked to me, it was like, oh my gosh, I really can have a good life.
Yeah, it began to make sense.
And our tenets talk about, in spite of my disorder, mm-hmm. I can have a full and rich life.
Yeah.
And I I said those 10 so many times,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't. I just read them.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. It wasn't heart knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
And help those who maybe are where you were at and are struggling and saying, yeah, but nobody understands quite how depressed I am, or nobody understands how difficult this is. What is it? What's the difference? How would you say it in a way that they could understand that you can still override those feelings, override those emotions?
Well, maybe no one understands, but God gets it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he sure does, doesn't he?
And he cares. And he wants to be there and be compassionate, show compassion to you and comfort you if you would let him.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a gentleman and God's not going to force his way in.
Sure. And so really part of your process was saying, okay, Lord, I can't do this. And letting him in and letting him really show you who you are, so to speak, give you glimpses back to who you are.
That was part of it. And part of it was I wrote God a letter expressing my anger about my mental health. And it was very honest, and it was very angry.
Okay.
But
he can handle that, can he?
He can.
He can
but
handle it.
I got it out, because
good for you.
I had been holding on to that anger for so long.
Sure.
And I just needed to express to him how angry I was about my mental health.
Sure. And that gave you release then.
It did.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. So if you will, let's go back to the idea that there's the switch inside of ourselves.
Okay.
And let's just say this switch is there, and it's the kind of thing where you and I have to make decisions. We have to, in spite of how we feel, flip on that switch, right? It's the I choose to live in spite of how I feel today. Is that correct?
I actually have a really good example of that.
Go for it.
It actually happened this morning.
Okay.
I was laying in bed thinking about all the negative things in my life, and I became suicidal.
Okay.
And I did not want to get out of bed.
Sure.
And I knew the right people to call. I called the Boys Town National Hotline.
Mm-hmm.
And I called I talked to my grandma on a regular basis, so
Sure.
I called her, and I physically got out of bed when I was on the phone with my grandma, and it was a choice.
So in other words, that was key. You didn't just stay there, even though that's what you wanted to do probably, and what your mind was telling you, your brain was trying to fool you into.
I forced myself out of bed.
Yeah.
And I was active the rest of the day.
So
and
you didn't just give into it, yield to it.
Right.
The negative emotions.
And I feel so much better because I was productive all day long.
Isn't it amazing how that works?
Yeah, it really is.
So you pushed through.
Yeah.
What did your grandma say to you? Was she encouraging you to say, Stacy, get up? And
she told me, she said, Stacy, if I laid around and thought about all the negative things in my life, I would get depressed too.
Ah.
And I thought, it's not just me with a mental health diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
It's anybody that would lay around and think about negative things.
Just think about
would get depressed.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a wake up call. Like, okay, I need to get out of bed. I need to flip the switch.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you did. So initially, when you got out of bed and you took those first few steps out of bed, did it start to make a difference right away, or did you have to keep pushing through a little while?
It wasn't until I got out of my apartment.
Okay.
I mean, the whole time that I was getting ready, I was just dreading the day. And
Did you have someplace you needed to go?
I had errands I needed to run, and I had a couple appointments.
Okay. So you had things that you needed to push through for to accomplish and to do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's important, isn't it?
It is. It's important to have a plan for your day. Like the previous night, I made a list of all the errands I needed to run.
Sure.
And that really helps.
So it's not just choosing with your mind to live. It's actually choosing with your actions to live, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's choosing to go on with your day in spite of.
In spite of your feelings.
Yeah.
One of the, I had to set goals with my caseworker, and one of the goals that I set was to not live on my emotions.
There you go. Yeah. Very important. They lie to us sometimes, don't they?
They do.
And our emotions aren't always accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, or they might be accurate, but they're going to hold us back and keep us from feeling well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, today there possibly somebody listening, and they're saying, well, I don't know, you're talking about all this, and what would you say to them? How could you encourage somebody who is having troubles finding that internal switch, that, so to speak, where you finally switch it on and you say, I'm going to live. I'm done with this. Sit down, shut up, be quiet, mental illness. I'm not going to let you rule my life. What would you say to that person or people?
Well, one of the things I did this morning that might encourage you is I said out loud, Stacy, you can do this.
Oh.
And I just want you to know that you can do this.
Did you do that looking in the mirror? Did you do that while you were in bed yet? Or
while I was in bed.
Okay.
And I just want you to know that if I can recover, anybody can recover.
Yeah.
Seriously, I thought my situation was hopeless, and it wasn't. So I want you to know that there's hope.
Yeah, there are no hopeless situations, especially with God, right?
Absolutely.
He could take all the brokenness, all the junk, all the pain, all of our mistakes, and still make it all work for our good. And he's doing that for you. He's making it work for your good. Can you see a day when the struggle is not as intense and it's less and less all the time, and where he's going to use you for a greater good and use all of these things you've been through?
Yeah, I'm really excited actually about the plans and purposes that God has for me.
Yeah.
Because the opportunities and the possibilities are absolutely endless.
They are. Yeah.
And I can't wait to see what God does.
Yeah, if you go back to the pastor and what he said about who you were prior to mental health struggles, kind of grappling with your mind, he said, you're a powerful woman and a woman of faith, and he saw you do significant ministry. Now with all this additional, so to speak, life experience that kind of gives you a degree in something that you didn't want necessarily, but because of it, now the potential that the Lord has in using you is incredible.
And that person that I was, that ministered to that young lady, I'm still that person.
Yeah. Plus all this additional experience. Yeah. One of the things that you said early on, as we started, you said you had allowed your diagnosis to define you. It was defining you. Can you tell me what that means to you? How was it defining you? What does that mean?
Well, it's kind of hard to explain, but I thought about my diagnosis all the time.
Okay.
I talked about it all the time. I lived my diagnosis.
You lived thinking, this is who I am.
Yeah.
This is going on.
I kind of gave up that I would ever get better. Mm-hmm. I was hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
And that slowed down my recovery.
Sure. Do you think that part of becoming your diagnosis is also allowing every time that you're so focused on your illness, you're so focused on the diagnosis, and you're so internally focused on how you feel all the time that you actually just yield to every feeling. You just yield to
Absolutely.
it, right? You don't get to practice any self-control. You don't get to practice any ignoring it or whatever. Kind of like I would be if I was dieting and I was hungry and I had a thought of eating a big, huge piece of cake and I went ahead and did that. We couldn't really say that my hunger caused me to do that. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. I have to practice some self-control. I have to choose to not do that, even though that's what I want to do, right?
Right. And, I didn't use coping skills.
Mm.
I gave up.
Mm-hmm.
And because, again, I was hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's the point of using coping skills if you're hopeless?
Mm-hmm.
And I was very extremely needy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I had become a victim and I was just craving anybody that could help me at all.
Mm-hmm. Let's think about this for a second. One of the basic principles I was taught when I took the peer specialist training a couple of years ago is the fact that if you only think of your diagnosis from a medical perspective and you only use the medical side of the recovery coin, so to speak, I always say there's two sides to that coin. There's the medical side, which we need, the diagnosis, the medicine, some therapy, and, we need our doctor and we need our therapist here and there. And the other side is the choosing to live. Now, how do I live a life in spite of this? And if you only deal with the medical side, you begin to have learned helplessness and hopelessness.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and so you were just really living on the one side of recovery, so to speak.
I was.
And hardly at that, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I would go to my doctor and my therapist, and we would talk about how miserable I was, and it just never, until recently, it just never changed.
Yeah, do you think that there's somehow that maybe we get kind of into our minds that at some point where I've got this terrible thing and I need somebody to give me a magic bullet?
Yep, and I think I was almost codependent on people.
Mm-hmm. Hoping that they could help
fix me.
Mm-hmm. And what was the truth? What's the truth?
The truth was only God could cure me.
Yeah. And you had to work with him, didn't you?
Yep.
He could pull somebody out of bed and get them up, but generally speaking, he prefers that we kind of cooperate with him, right?
Yeah, and I think for me, the first step in my breakthrough was writing that letter.
Yeah. Dealing with the emotions that were holding you back, really.
That I was stuffing.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Well, golly, it's really good to talk with you. And I know that this has been an important step. And now you and I both know recovery's not automatic. It's not like, okay, now you got that down, now move on to the next thing, right? You're going to live this for a while. There'll be another bump. There'll be this or that. But hopefully you'll have learned and be able to just utilize these things. And once you know you can get out of bed in spite of how you feel, and you do that enough times, you'll know it every time from then on, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is that you told me, I think, this morning on the phone when we spoke about the interview today, that you certainly still have some thoughts going on, but you are choosing to not listen and continue on with your day, correct?
And the magical thing is the longer that I pushed them away and the longer that I did other errands and other things,
the less it was
there.
there.
The thoughts kind of just went away.
Do you, I don't know about you, but I have, when it's really, really quiet around me, then I start to hear ringing in my ears. And I notice, like, if the lights are buzzing or whatever. And yet, if I'm focused on other things, I don't notice those things so much. Mm-hmm. In fact, I don't notice them at all. And sometimes I think that our mental health disorders can do that to us, where if we're quiet, nothing else has got our attention. Nothing else, we're not thinking about anything else except about ourselves and how bad we feel and how awful, blah, blah, blah. It's so easy then to just be so in tune with the, so to speak, ringing in our ears that we kind of forget. And you're verifying that just by saying, as you went about your day to day, and the more you did, the less you were thinking about the stuff that might have kept you in bed otherwise.
Because I didn't have time for it, I was busy doing other things.
Yeah, and medicine helps us. Medicine is important, and most people need to take medicine, and there's no shame in taking medicine, but we have to start working with our medicine, don't we? We have to work alongside of it. We have to do our part. Medicine
isn't the only cure.
Right. It's not the full magic bullet that I always say medicine got my brain to working right, but then I had to start doing the right things and start thinking the right kind of thoughts and take control over that. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And hopefully we'll do another interview in the future and kind of get a report and an update from you and see how you're doing. Does that sound good?
Thank you, Brad.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stacy, for being here today. And to those of you who are listening to this broadcast, we are really glad that you joined us here today at Fresh Hope. Living with a mental health challenge can be overwhelming and at best extremely challenging at times. We want you to remember that you are not alone. You might consider attending a Fresh Hope meeting in your area. And if there's no Fresh Hope group that meets in your area, maybe you want to start one, or talk to your pastor in your church and see if the church is interested in starting one. But there are other support groups that you can attend, NAMI or DBSA groups. You can check for those by Googling those. And if you'd like to speak to someone right now as you're hearing this or soon thereafter, you might want to consider going to freshhope.us. That's www.freshhope.us. And you can click on a little icon there that says Hope Coaches. And you'll be able to speak to someone who is actually a trained Hope coach. There's someone who's a peer just like you and me who has a mental health diagnosis and are in the process of recovering. And those Hope coaches are there to share with you, to encourage you, to speak words of life to you, and to just be there. Now, if there's nobody online at this point, when you go there, email the person that you feel like you could connect most with, and they'll be back in touch with you shortly. Our email, if you'd like to talk to us or let us know about a program that you'd like to hear or how you felt about today's broadcast, or if you'd like to even send a note of encouragement to Stacy, you can do that by writing to Fresh Hope Today at freshhope.us. That's Fresh Hope Today at freshhope.us. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to know what future topics or questions that you might have for future podcast. And we'd love to have your feedback. And you are important to us. Be sure to click on the Give Us Your Feedback link on the website, and we'd love to hear from you. Fresh Hope is a weekly podcast of Fresh Hope Ministries. We are, in fact, a ministry that started out of my own journey of recovery. And if you'd like even more insights on how to live well in spite of your mental health issues, we'd encourage you to consider becoming a premium member of Fresh Hope Today. And by becoming a premium member of Fresh Hope Today, you can access many more broadcasts and additional programs and insights for living well in spite of having a mental health diagnosis. Also, you might want to consider picking up our book. It's a workbook for Fresh Hope, Living Well in Spite of a Mental Health Diagnosis. You can find that by going to our website, www.freshhope.us, or by going to amazon.com. And we're just really glad that you took time out of your day today. Listen, my friend, there is hope, fresh and new in the Lord.